All right, what's going on, everybody? Jesse Montano here, out in Winnipeg again. I've got my great friend Meghan Angley with me here again in the podcast studio that's set up here in the room. Meghan, how you doing? How you enjoying Winnipeg?
I am adapting to Winnipeg. I'm learning every day. The weather has held out really nicely, and I've had some good food, so I enjoy aspects of it for sure.
I'm with you. I was very nervous about what the weather was going to be like even now in April, but it's like the sun's out. The sky is blue.
Yeah.
I will take it. I'm with adapting is the best way to put it. We've met some great people.
We've met a lot of great people.
In Winnipeg. Louisa in particular.
Shout out Louisa.
Shout out Louisa. I know you're listening to this, I'm sure.
We should have plugged the pod to her.
We should have plugged the pod to her.
One more viewer, listener.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And I'm sure she would have just helped it grow all throughout Winnipeg. Big shout out to our friends over at Landmark Lincoln for helping us get here. But Meghan, let's just kind of dive into it. We've had a game day. We had a practice day yesterday. And then we just left morning skate. I guess I haven't really talked to you, even not on a podcast, just about your overall thoughts from game one. So I guess, just kind of your broad strokes takeaway from that first game, Avs Jets.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is that I was impressed by the Avs effort. And I want to preface that by saying ahead of this series, it had shades of the Seattle series because of the gloom surrounding, okay, there's no Sam Girard. Now there's no Jonathan Drouin. Logan O'Connor's out for the rest of the season. Nobody expected Gabriel Landeskog to be available, but, he's also not available.
Right.
And so this last stretch for Georgiev has prompted concern too. What's the goaltending situation going to be? So going into game one in Winnipeg, I had some concerns that they were going to fall victim to a similar fate that met them with the Seattle series. There were just so many things stacking against them that they can't necessarily control. And what I like to see that was already so different from the Seattle series was depth contributions.
Yeah.
And so that was one thing that stood out to me from game one that surprised me, because in game one, they're already getting goal scoring from a couple of different places, and they desperately needed that last year. And then the other thing that stood out too was some of the top guys still continuing to be the top guys, and I think they have even more to give in that, right? But Valeri Nichushkin comes to mind. And looking at how he returned from the player assistance program, he had to shake off a little bit of rust there, I think. And the final game with the Edmonton game, 2-point night, he carries into game one getting on the score sheet. And I think that was so important because I think people were also left wondering, what is Valeri Nichushkin going to be in the playoffs? Because so far, at least how he closed out the regular year, it felt like he had a little bit more to give. So already seeing him start to return to form at the most meaningful time was also another positive thing that I took away from the game. Obviously, goaltending still looms over this team. And so there are certainly negatives coming out of a 7-6 loss because it's high scoring. It's more eventful than I thought it was going to be, but it was really fun. The intensity on both sides was ramped up. So it also kind of solidified the fact that this team can flip that switch. Yeah. Some people were wondering that too, because there were some difficult games down the stretch in the regular season. And I think this is a testament to the Avs have the ability to do this, and they've proven it time and time again. Last year was a little bit challenging for circumstances out of their control, but I like to see that they can turn it on when it comes necessary.
Well, so you, do you want to grab your phone?
What?
The point you make about Val, I think, is so, he gets that first goal, beautiful shot, by the way, to open the scoring in game one. And it was almost just kind of a reminder, for me at least, of like, holy smokes, they missed this guy last year in the playoffs.
Yes.
Like, that is probably the one. I don't think they would have gotten by Dallas either way last year. They were just too banged up and all of that. But like, I really did. I thought if you had a healthy Valeri Nichushkin last year, you beat Seattle and you at least, go one round deeper. Like, I do think he's that kind of difference maker. And I think that's a great call out of like, he's had a weird year. A lot of in and out, obviously the player assistance, stint that was almost 2 full months. He's had some injuries that he's dealt with. So to see him jump in and contribute like that right off the bat. And look, I'm also with you 100% on everything I saw, and this feels so mean, and people have heard me say this a couple times now, like everything I saw outside of the blue paint, I thought was extremely encouraging, and really almost nothing but positives.
No, I agree. Like it gets even past that. So they are down Jonathan Drouin, and as a result, the forward group is mixed up in kind of an unusual way. You see Zach Parise, 39 years old, on the top line.
Yeah.
And this is not a demerit of Jolki Viranta, but you've got a guy who didn't have an NHL contract to start the season on your third line, and it's a really effective line.
Totally.
You look at Miles Wood, who I think we might underestimate the fact that he battled illness multiple times this season and was not the same player when he came back from it. He lost a significant amount of weight. And so I feel like the last half of his season left a lot of people wanting more from him. And I think you can point to he was just really under the weather for that portion and didn't really spring back to 100% health. And looking at what he was able to do with that Colton line, game one of the playoffs, is like, this is why he's here. Yeah. He is meant to bring energy. He was getting under a lot of players' skin, and it was mutual for what it's worth. And I think that line, that's what you wanted, right? Yep. You wanted, and when Logan O'Connor was no longer an option for that line, it was a bit worrisome, but to see them bring the energy and be able to swing momentum in what they do, I think is another positive coming out of that game. And the middle stat line, it's getting somewhere. Like the offensive...
That was their best game, I thought. That was his best game, at least.
I agree. And we don't know what Casey Middlestat looks like in a playoff series. And he also needed to be baptized into the playoffs. And so I look at game one like he's also learning and on the fly. And so I think that he is not going to underestimate the intensity of the game. And I think he met it very well. Yep. And so I think that that line in particular can be more of an offensive threat than maybe we would have guessed at the start of it all.
Well, and I'll take it a step further, piggybacking off what you were just talking about. And look, this maybe is going to, people might roll their eyes at this because they're down 1-0 in the series. Like they lost the first game. But to me, when I was watching that first game, again, relative to what you're talking about, with the way that third line looked, and hey, Zach Parise, he doesn't have the speed, but like the competitiveness is absolutely there to play with Mikko and Nate. I was saying, look, we've talked about it all year that they built this team for the playoffs. Guys you were just talking about, Miles Wood, Ross Colton, maybe there were stretches throughout the regular season that they kind of left you wanting a little bit more. But, then you have a guy like Valeri Nichushkin, Arturi Lehkonen, back in your lineup, in your top six. Like this is, and again, this is kind of what watching that first game and listening to you talk right now is kind of my takeaway from it of like, yeah, we're seeing this playoff, built roster.
Yeah.
Already in that first game, kind of like embracing the moment, stepping up to the intensity. And, Ross Colton's got a Stanley Cup ring. He's been through it before. You got 13 guys on this team who have, a ring. And so I thought that was maybe a little bit of the shades of, like you said, being able to flip that switch, understanding the intensity and the gravity of the situation, and being able to kind of rise to that occasion, hang 6 goals on a team that is as stingy defensively and a goaltender as good as Connor Hellebuck. I think there are so many good things to take away from that game. But the one thing Evan and I kept coming back to right after when we were talking about the game was everything that you and I have just said is true. I think you laid out, especially some of those individual players there in the middle. I agree with you. There's a cloud over all of it because I guess what was your take on the goaltending in that first game? Because if you get on Twitter, which as you and I have discovered, it's not necessarily always the general consensus, but to me, I think what's so interesting about it is it's more split than maybe I've ever seen.
Yeah.
There's the camp of so many mistakes, you can't hang them out to dry, and then there's a camp of you need a save. How did you see that first game, and are you maybe somewhere kind of in the middle?
I do feel in that game particularly you needed a save. And it's just looking at how stifling Colorado's D was on the whole.
Yes.
For what it's worth, there were defensive breakdowns.
Sure.
So that's why I think in the Angley's angle piece, it's good, bad, and ugly. The bad is the defensive mistakes that get made in front of Georgiev. I'm not excusing them. There needs to be better coverage in their own end. And honestly, just some of the lapses that lead to turnovers are things that they can't be making in the playoffs, mistakes that they can't be making. At the same time, they really did a lot to limit the high danger chances of the Jets, almost by half of what they were able to create the other way. And then obviously too, seeing the goal support that they provided, that's where it just becomes really difficult to point to the team defense in front of him. It can always be better, and it certainly does need to be for game 2.
Absolutely.
But that's where I'm looking at Georgiev wanting a little bit more. And it comes down to the way some of the goals get scored too. Obviously, when they're 7, there's a lot to break down there. Some of those are power play goals, but the ones that stand out to me is the Lowry goal that goes 5-hole. It's off an odd man rush. So okay, the Avs kind of in the final stretch had an issue of not anticipating a broken play in the offensive zone and then being caught off the rush and not defending very well against it. I think that's true. So that would be the criticism there. This was a problem before. You need to clean it up.
Again,
But the other part is Lowry shouldn't have been able to get that puck between Georgiev's pads. And then similarly, Morrissey's goal from distance, there isn't even a screen. And so I think those are the two that I look to very specifically, okay, I situationally, I think, look at Georgiev and I can point to one different thing, all right, the defense needed to be better in this way. They shouldn't have allowed this play to unfold.
If you're looking at each highlight individually, 100%.
100%, and that's true of game 1. But bigger picture, you look at not only how little the Avs allowed, not just with high danger chances, but shot volume in general. And then you look at the physicality that the Avs played with as well to achieve that result. They were competing. It wasn't perfect, but they were competing. And I think that's where Georgiev let some of the frustration get the best of him, because there was frustration. There was the slamming the stick on the ice, and that is exactly the kind of thing that not only Winnipeg is seeing, but the team in front of him. And so that's where I think the frustration that Georgiev visibly showed affected how the Avs played a little bit in front of him, because throughout the course of the game, I felt the Avs competed full 60 minutes. However, there were moments they looked less confident in themselves. And I think some of the mistakes that they make are overcompensating for a lack of trust that they have in Georgiev. And so sometimes they start doing things defensively that are not to standard. That is procedurally not what the Avs normally do. And so they abandon their structure a little bit when they see that their goaltender isn't super confident in themselves. And I think that lends itself to some of the defensive mistakes that get made. And so that's why I'm not hanging this solely on Georgiev's shoulders, but it's why it's so important for him to try to keep it together just a little bit more.
Angley's Angle is on the DNVR.com after the games. It is the most thorough and analytical breakdown of Avalanche games. Make sure you guys are checking that out. You said a couple different things there that I want to touch on. One was, you said how stifling the Avs defense was on the whole throughout game 1. And that was the part for me that I just, I was talking with JJ Jerez, and he was like, oh, man, but, the D-zone coverage just sucks. And a couple people said that. And I said, look, I think you can make that argument at several points throughout the season. But I said, for game 1, I'm really just not willing to concede that point. On the 60-minute effort, they were fantastic defensively. They were very, very good,
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
There's vulnerabilities behind their own goal line.
Yeah.
But, that's probably true of every team.
Right.
Winnipeg also made 6 mistakes in this contest. And so it's not perfect, but it really isn't that bad.
It's not that bad. They did so many things well. And on top of that, Megan, there were large stretches where not only were they solid defensively, they weren't giving the puck up.
The first 10 minutes of this game was completely Colorado.
It was dominant. Shots were 11-1 when Valeri Nichushkin, that was the 11th shot when Valeri Nichushkin gets that one to go. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on was the Morrissey goal. Because that was one that I just, again, there's a lot of people online that were like, oh, it's a screen. What do you want him to do? We had a perfect sight line on that, on that shot. And I could see Morrissey's stick, and I could see Alexander Georgiev's eyes. He had to look at that shot the whole way. He wasn't aggressive enough. He wasn't out on top of the crease enough. He just, I didn't think on that one in particular, he didn't make it difficult enough for Morrissey for that puck to get through. And then the last thing that you said there was, I do completely agree with you on the confidence part of it. I think when he's slamming his stick I think everyone that you just mentioned picks up on it. His team picks up on it. The other team picks up on it. But in this environment, the crowd picked up on it.
Oh my gosh.
And the crowd just started feeding it to him.
I worried about that.
Me too. Because, I mean, when you're talking about a goalie that's already, mentally fragile and trying to build his confidence back up, I mean, this is a hostile environment. Like, this is a loud crowd. And they start picking up on it, and they're going to be all over him tonight. It does feel to me like the Avs don't have faith that they're going to get a stop.
No, and I think they try to, and the minute that they see him lose faith in himself, slamming a stick on the ice, they have no choice but to also abandon that faith. And that's going to be tough. Like, I think they're going to give him a clean slate for game 2.
I do too.
And until he gives them a reason not to, I think they're going to try to rally around him. I really liked you mentioning Ross Colton and his experience before, because I thought that was so true of his interview in between game 1 and 2, the practice day. He had such a calm resolve, and there is a lack of panic, not only in this group, but in Ross Colton. And I think that is an understated quality that he brings to this group. And in his interview, where he is very calm about how they need to approach game 2, he's talking about supporting Georgiev. And whether you agree with that approach or not, like I've seen people be critical of Bednar very publicly rallying around Georgiev in interviews, very being quick to say that's our starting goaltender. People are really skeptical and critical of that. But I think it's important for not only Bednar to publicly endorse Georgiev as the goaltender, but for his teammates too. And so I thought it was really mature and good for Colton to acknowledge how much they need to rally around Georgiev and support him as best they can.
Well, and taking it a step further too, like, they are not only are they supporting him, they're doing everything they can to prop him up. And to your point, that is 100% the way it should be.
Right.
You should be doing that. Like, they, Ross Colton, said yesterday, I found it to be a funny quote. He goes, yeah, there's probably a couple of those Georgie would want back, but that's on us.
Yeah.
Like, and that is just like the ultimate, teammate mentality of that's his way of acknowledging, look, if you ask Georgie, he probably didn't like that performance either, but we're going to wear that. We're going to tell him we are going to clean things up, and we're going to give you every chance to be successful.
Yeah.
Kale made the comment after the game of, look, we realize tonight we can't make a single mistake, and because they're going to bury it. So we're going to clean up our mistakes.
Right.
And they're just doing, and again, I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I'm saying this is an overwhelmingly positive thing. They are doing everything in that room possible to build Georgie up.
Right.
And say, hey, that is not on you. That's on us. Sure, we scored 6 on the best goalie in the league this year, but we didn't do enough to help you. We're going to do more to help you. Trying to help him build that confidence up. Don't hang your head. Don't wear this one. I firmly believe you're a goalie person. I believe NHL goaltender is the most difficult position to play in pro sports because it is only 50% your physical ability. It is half what goes on between your ears and being able to stay mentally in a game.
No, and I know that's not what people necessarily want to hear, but it's the path out of the first round for the Avs. This is the way that it has to be.
Yes.
And I think that we've seen better performances from Georgiev. And so from a skill perspective, I think he's capable of more than we've seen.
Yes.
And I look at how he's matched up against McDavid outside of just the All-Star game specifically. And I'm like, there is a skill upside to this goaltender that he hasn't fully tapped into. And it is because of the mental challenges that he's faced. And this is not the ideal situation. I don't want to mince words. I don't think any of us are pretending that this is ideal, but this is the way it has to be.
Yeah.
This is the hand that the Avs have been dealt. This is where they're at with their goaltending situation. And so the best course of action to get them through round 1 is to rally around their goaltender no matter what.
I completely agree with you, Megan. And there's a lot of people who are, giving it to Chris McFarland a little bit for not going out and getting another goaltender and this, that, and the other. Here was my argument at the deadline. I said, if you're going to go out and spend assets, you have to get someone that you think could come in and truly challenge for the number 1. Otherwise, would anyone be feeling good right now if it was they can go to Jake Allen? You know what I mean? Going out and just getting a simple backup, even with NHL experience, that's not your solution. So I'm with you. Alexander Georgiev in the past has shown that he's talented and skilled enough to play at a number one level. I thought he was very good all last year. The entire season
I
last
didn't
year.
even think the Seattle series was bad.
I
There were
didn't put
just
that on him.
too many hurdles for that team to overcome, that even the small sample size of playoff Georgiev that I saw last year is like, if he could just be that.
Do that.
That would be fine.
Yes.
Because I think the team in front of him is leaps and bounds better than they were last year.
I agree. Yeah, I completely agree. And to me, that's what it was that this management group said, we have seen enough out of him in the past that, yeah, we think he can do that. And so they went with it. They rolled the dice with it. Now, here's the other part that maybe, I don't know if has been talked about enough, and it's hard to maybe talk about it because it's so far in the past and he's retired now. But like, going into training camp, you thought it was Georgiev and Francouz.
Yeah.
If a healthy Pavel Francouz was here, he'd be starting tonight.
Absolutely. And there wouldn't be any weird feelings about it because that was the relationship between both goaltenders. There was an understanding and a respect for one another. Yep. And so it wouldn't have, like we're talking about, if Justus Annunen comes in this series, Georgiev's never playing another game in Colorado. Right. That wouldn't have been the case with the Francouz because there is the understanding that they're there to lean on each other and help versus one is coming to take the other's job.
Right. Yeah. And so there is a long, kind of complicated bit of context to put to this situation. Like you said, this is the situation they're in. Good, bad, or ugly. This is it. And their only option is to find a way to dig out of it. You know, I tweeted this morning that tonight is without question the biggest start of Alexander Georgiev's career.
It's true.
He's got, look, the Avs, like you were saying, people talking about Jared Bednar and stuff. I actually think that the way that the Avs have handled this publicly is like the blueprint for how you handle a situation like this. They have done nothing but put their full support behind Georgiev, have done nothing but say, we believe in you, you can do it, we think you can get us through. And they're trying to put him in every position he can to succeed. And now the rubber meets the road for real tonight. Every time over the last couple of weeks where it's been like, oh, this is a get right game. This is it. There's no more getting right. It's figure it out, or that might be it for you in Colorado. And that might be it for you as a number one in the NHL.
You go down 0-2 in the series. You come back. Those are hard games. It's hard to get the series back. And there hasn't been a lot more runway in the regular season for him to build a better case for himself. And so it does start to get a lot more challenging. And this was the whole gamble that he took coming out of New York and why he wanted to be here. And so it's a lot of pressure, but it's kind of what he's been training for, quite literally.
Meghan, that's a fantastic point. He has had this chip on his shoulder of, I can be the guy. I can be the number one. I watched him get contentious with a New York Rangers writer earlier this season because the guy said, hey, well, you always thought you could be a number one, and that's what you're doing now. And he said, no, I didn't think. I knew, and I just needed the opportunity. Well, here you go, man. This is it. This is what number ones do. Like, they show up in these moments. So let's see it. Like, this is what he said he wants. You're right. That's what we've been training for.
Like, it can be something to get excited for if I'm Alexander Georgiev.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, rise to the occasion.
Exactly.
And I think that's been the part that has been the most disappointing for me is whether it was the last game against the Jets in the regular season, the game in Vegas, now game one. It's like, okay, how many bounce back starts do you get here before you say you're not bouncing back? And then, holy smokes, have you ever thought of a worst possible time in your life to be sick than what Justus Annunen is going through right now?
Yeah, I feel for him too because he's probably sitting back looking at this opportunity that could have been for him as a goaltender to really make a case for him. And I don't doubt that he'll eventually get healthy and be an option, but it's put the Avs in another situation that is a little bit out of their control. And Arvid Holm could not have come in as relief for Georgiev in game one. So
I was told yesterday, and I don't know if this is true. I was told this by someone, but again they were like, well, this is kind of what I had been hearing. So again, take this with a massive grain of salt. I've been told that there was strong consideration being made into making Justus the game 1 starter until he woke up sick. Again, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that was the actual conversation. The person that told me is not like they don't make stuff up, but again, just that's a big claim, and so I had told there was strong consideration at least being made to give Justus the game 1 start, and if that is any version of true, they would have gone to him after goal 4, goal 5 maybe.
Absolutely, because of the mental component.
Right. And so yeah, you feel for him. It's like, holy smokes, there's been some times in my life where I'm like, ooh, I'd hate to get sick and miss this.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate right now.
And I'm so excited then for what's to come for Justus. We've not talked about him a lot here because he's sick. He's just not an option, but he is a goaltender for the future, for the Avs. It kind of explains the contract extension. And honestly, I don't think that was necessarily solidified at the start of this year. I don't think they knew what to do with Annunen and had to make some decisions. He is such a great camp that I think they even reconsider utilizing him more in the regular season. Mm-hmm. He gets hurt, misses some time, so that kind of affects our ability to see him in the starter's net more in the regular season. Mm-hmm. But every opportunity that he has had, he has seized to the most of his ability. Totally. And I think that's why we're not talking about him a lot right now, but we will in the future. Yeah. It is still... his future in Colorado is still so bright, and there's so much opportunity there for him to take.
Yeah. Well, and I think you and I had maybe even talked off the record about when he signed that extension. It's like, okay, well, he's the backup next year, and I think they're going to give him a chance to get a little bit more of a clean split, and then the net's fully up for grabs. And now with the way that Georgiev has stumbled down the stretch, barring him turning it around and helping the Avs go on some type of a run here, I mean, Justus needs to spend this summer preparing to try to win a number 1 job. He's, to your point, he's seized every opportunity. They reassigned him at the beginning of the year because they thought so highly of him and they wanted to see him go get a lot of quality starts against pro competition. And he did that. He had a great year last year in the American League. Had another, solid season, like you said, dealt with some injuries, and then has come up and has taken advantage of every start that he's gotten. The Avs haven't ever developed a goaltender. He's trending. I don't want to get too far ahead, but he's trending.
No, I don't want to project too far ahead for what he could be, but I do think that there was a goaltender deal that the Avs wanted to get across the finish line. It would have come at the expense of Annunen. And in what they've poured into his development so far and what he teases as possible upside, it's actually not worth it right now to lose out on this homegrown goaltender who I think has benefited so much from the combination of UC Parklet and Peter Budaj. Mm-hmm. He loves Peter Budaj. Yeah. And something I've been meaning to ask Justus about is the fact that he was a Black Ace during the Cup run and was around that team. And so I know he didn't necessarily compete with that group, but he was around that championship mentality. Mm-hmm. And I think that is going to probably explain a lot of the maturity we've seen from him through this point, but also a strength of his down the stretch.
Totally. Meghan, this has been awesome. Any final thoughts on tonight, what you're expecting? I'm not going to ask you for a prediction, but just kind of what are you expecting to see out of the Avs and maybe even out of the Jets?
I think it's going to be a lower event game. Yeah. I think both teams walked away with a lot of things to make adjustments on, and so I think it's going to be a little bit cleaner, tighter, but just as physical. And so I think it's going to be an even more challenging goaltender matchup, and that's going to be the basis of probably a lot of our writing and conversation tonight.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and I think that's where the game will settle. I'm really anxious to see what the start of the game looks like. So I think the Avs are going to be really juiced up, knowing, hey, we played a good game, we want to replicate that, and it starts with a good start, which is what they had last game. But I think the Jets are going to be jacked up too, and I think they're going to be trying to get to Georgiev early. I think the crowd is going to be insane tonight. So I think there's a chance that we could see another, maybe even a first period, maybe not 6 goals, but another kind of high-flying first. But I'm with you 100%. I think second, third period will be way tighter, way more kind of controlled and not slower, but teams not making as many mistakes.
Yeah. That was where a lot of the mistakes came from, that track meet up and down the ice. Yeah. It was exciting to watch, but I think it'll be a little tighter.
Yeah, I'm with you. Well, Megan, this has been awesome. We'll see what happens here tonight.
See you tonight.
Yeah, I'll see you here in just a couple hours. Well, although not too few of hours, as we've got a ways to go before puck drop tonight. 8:50 p.m. Central Time puck drop, so 7:50 back home. Megan, hopefully we've got a nice long series here. You and I can talk again, and
so
then
we can come back.
Come back.
Winnipeg.
Yes, exactly. To beautiful Winnipeg and all the lovely people. All right, guys, that does it. It's Avs and Jets game 2 tonight. Thank you to Meghan Angley, DNVR. Like I said, make sure you guys are checking out all of her written content. It is some of the best in the biz. But yeah, Jesse Montano, Meghan Angley. We will talk to you guys later. Thanks so much.